Welcome, everybody. We're so glad to have you here. We are going to talk about project management, project managers for community projects. And this is a Knowledge Bites webinar, which is part of a series put on by the Southern Vermont Economy Project, MEG's beautiful regional capacity building program. So regional capacity just means we try to make sure that folks in Southern Vermont have more tools, more knowledge, more connections to get things done and make our community even more vibrant. And that program is funded in part by USDA's Rural Community Development Initiative. So today we're talking about project management because we have a region full of vibrant, smart, dedicated volunteers, and that can only get you so far when you're talking about a complex project. People don't have enough time, they don't have enough expertise. Things get lost in the shuffle. So we're going to talk about what project management looks like for community projects. And we have a couple of folks here today who will give some specifics and some background and help you figure out what that might look like for your project. What would having a project manager even mean for you? What do they do? What kinds are there? When would you hire one, etc. So Anthony Gerard is the vice president of GPI Construction. They're a local construction management and general contracting firm, and they've handled a lot of community projects around the region. So Anthony will be sharing some specifics and stories about those with you today. And he also is president of the Brattleboro Area Affordable Housing Coalition Board. Yes, which thank you, that's important. We need that. And has a solid history in organic farming. So he's got his Vermont cred. Charlie Hunter is a painter in Bellows Falls, and he also runs live music and train travel expeditions here and there.
I have a cat that is really wanting to help.
And yes, his cat has some strong opinions about project management. So we will hear more about that. So Charlie is here because he's the treasurer of Rockingham for Progress, and their inaugural project is to restore the Miss Bellows Falls Diner and see it up and running again as a community-owned enterprise. So he's going to talk a little bit about what having a project manager has looked like for their project. I'm just looking in the chat and seeing we've got people from Putney and Bellows Falls, Wilmington, Brattleboro, so a nice representation. Feel free as you're coming in just to keep typing in the chat where you're coming from and what projects you're working on or thinking about, because that'll be helpful for our presenters as we're going along. And we will have a Q&A session at the end, but if you have burning questions pop up throughout the presentation, feel free to type those in the chat. Meg will keep an eye on that for us. All right, so Charlie, let's start with you and your cat.
Yes.
Can you share just a little bit about the beginnings of the Miss Bellows Falls project and how did you know you needed a project manager?
Well, the Miss Bellows Falls Diner had closed at the beginning of the pandemic. And Jeff Dunbar, who's on the village trustees and works for Farnham Insulation and owns several properties in town with his brother, approached me just saying, the diner is, what's going to happen with the diner? And the problem was the diner is basically it came on site 80 years ago in May, and it's worn out. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's widely beloved, but the foundation is cracked. The structure itself is kind of bowing out. The other structures attached to it were constructed higgledy-piggledy. It needs to be saved, but it was kind of beyond. It didn't make economic sense to save it. So we reached out to Preservation Trust of Vermont and asked them if they had any background in a nonprofit purchasing a building and then leasing it out to an operator. And they said that absolutely dovetails with a major initiative that they are promoting, which is community supported enterprises. So we went to Rockingham for Progress, which was a dormant 501c3. Went to them and said, would you guys be interested in being involved in this? They said that what a wonderful project this was. So I went to work fundraising, and we purchased the diner in May or June, I think May of 2023, and very quickly realized what an enormous project this is. And Jeff said, well, we really should look at getting a project manager. And I said, what is a project manager? And Jeff explained that a project manager is our representative as we are dealing with architects, with construction people. It's someone whose job it is to think about the project and what we need to do. And that's our project manager down there in the lower right wearing those styling khakis. That's Andrew Dye from Walpole, New Hampshire. So as it says, yeah, that's assembling the team. How did we know we needed a project manager? Jeff said we did. Then we selected one, and then we chose the architect. Does that make sense? Anyone have any questions about that?
Charlie, can you talk a little bit about how the project manager was involved in the process of selecting an architect, and what's been useful about having him on the team so far?
Absolutely. The thing that it was immediately apparent what a boon having a project manager was, because even though Jeff is involved in construction, he used to work at Jansowitz, and now he works at Farnham, or not construction so much, but building stuff. Even though he was involved in that, this is a very intricate puzzle that has to get put together. And a project manager knows these puzzles. For someone like me, it's a world I know nothing about. Preservation Trust has been wonderful in kind of walking us through what the processes would be. But since it's not really the expertise that I or others of our team have, being able to work with someone who, yes, this is what they think about. Yes, we are paying them, so we know they're on our side. They were immediately helpful in that when we were working on choosing the architect, the we've got a couple of Preservation Trusts suggested a couple of names. Andrew had a couple of names. We had conversations with various architects, selected the architectural team, and then what was incredibly helpful was when we had the first meeting with the architect where they were presenting their ideas, Andrew was there, the project manager was there to say, curves are expensive. He was there to say, let's look at, what size spaces we need for each component before we get into designing the skin. He was someone grounded in practicality as opposed to the flights of fancy that it's easy to get swept up in when one is dealing with architects, because the architects are all wanting to be Venturi, they're wanting to be rock stars, and our job is to create a nice little melody as opposed to a rock and roll anthem.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. That was really striking to me when you talked about that design conversation and just how really practical Andrew was able to be with saying, that's beautiful, and it can also be beautiful but less expensive if we, do this one thing.
Exactly.
The other thing that really struck me in talking with you about this was how Preservation Trust was really eager for you to have a project manager. And in fact, in talking with Anthony and Charlie about this ahead of time, they really affirmed that grantors love project managers, and Preservation Trust reimburses for project management costs immediately. So it's not like, you know, you have to wait a certain period or till the end of the project or whatever. So that really can be helpful. And Anthony actually had a story to share about a project manager, a grantor wanting a project manager. So I'll shift over to him and let him get started. I think that was on your list, Anthony, wasn't it, that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, I've full of stories, but I can share a couple. But no, when we were involved with the Groundworks collaborative building, both buildings down on South Main Street, and we were, the Josh Davis and John Hoover were the two owners we were dealing with. They had selected Duncan Wisniewski architects. Sam Beal was the principal that we were working with, and we took a year designing the project and budgeting it and finalizing everything. We started building, and then a funder came in and said, "Hey, don't you guys want a project manager?" And Groundworks said, "Well, yeah, we didn't have the money for it, but if you want to pay us to have a project manager, sure." And so 2 months into the project, we actually got a project manager on board, where that person would have been helpful a year earlier. And Groundworks didn't think they could afford it. And so I would certainly encourage folks to seek out specific funding sources that would pay for a project manager, because I can get into some other details about where things get missed. And like Charlie was talking about with Andrew, despite the architects and GPI's wealth of knowledge and everybody on the project team, having that one extra dedicated person in there can make a big difference in reining. I appreciate Charlie's comment about sort of reining in the architects, because I have been on the owner's side as well when I was director of facilities at the Brattleboro Retreat, and we had architects come in and we gave them a specific budget. Okay, we have $115,000 to spend on renovating the cafeteria. And the architects came back with a $350,000 project. And, we said, we don't have that money. And I was project manager for the retreat at that time. I was on the owner's side, and I was calling them the whole time. I mean, every week we had design meetings, and I would say, no, we can't afford that, but they still pushed it forward. And so I ended up changing some of the mechanicals and light fixtures and some things to help, and flooring to help cut some of the costs back. But having someone knowledgeable there at the table is huge. So I don't know if Rachel, if you want me to just sort of carry into some of these other ones you have. I guess you have the slide up here, so I will kind of walk through some of the success stories that we've had having project managers on board. So the town of Brattleboro did an energy audit several years ago. I don't have the date exactly in my head. I mean, it was 2018, maybe 17. And the energy audit determined they had a number of opportunities among all the town buildings, including the library, the skating rink, the transportation center down on Flat Street. And they put an RFP out for construction managers. And I've got a couple slides down here. I'll walk you through that process of how you get into selecting a PM or construction manager, excuse me. But we were selected as CM, and so the town of Brattleboro has a owner's project manager named Stephen Horton, and Steve used to be vice president of DEW construction over in the Keene area. He went out on his own, a number of years ago as a construction consultant, project manager, and so the town of Brattleboro employs him to PM all of their construction projects. The Wyndham Solid Waste Management District is doing a project right now that we just bid on and lost the bid. They're going to be doing a bunch of renovations and adding to the composting plant up on Old Ferry Road. So anyway, Steve ran that project and a number of other ones in town. And he was able to, he helped the town find the engineer, and sort of refine the controls process for the buildings. He was, inspecting the work to make sure that it was done properly, and checking all the financials. and you know, was just there. You know, he did the entire sort of bid process. He put out the RFP for construction managers. He hired the design professional, and you know, maybe worked with with Patrick Moreland, the assistant town manager, in all of those decisions. But you know, he was there consulting, and you know, that made a huge difference in the efficiency of getting that project done, and you know, keeping it on budget and on schedule. So, right, getting right into some of these terms that Charlie and I have been talking about. When I think of a project manager, I think of, you know, so you want to start a construction project, you have an idea, you know, we want to, you know, put an addition on, you know, the library maybe, and where do we start? And so sort of identifying either a team of people, so you're, you know, a construction committee. And so we did the Brooks Library a few years ago. The library, Star Electronica, and had a team of folks at the library. They created a construction committee, and they selected an architect, which was Greenberg Architects. And they had more of a committee than an identified project manager. And Star Electronica was basically the person that I was reporting to, but I was a member of that team. So you're going to find someone within your organization that's going to kind of be the point person. And you know, they're going to look at the project with the builder. The builder's going to ask some questions. They'll be the point person for making decisions, and you know, keeping track of all the records, sort of meeting minutes, and you know, what week to week, what's you know, what decisions need to be made to move the project forward, and you know, keeping track of schedule and financials and stuff like that. I think of an owner's project manager as a third-party professional who has direct experience. So if you have someone in your team that has, you know, a good, you know, construction experience, that can suffice. But oftentimes, even someone who's familiar with construction doesn't necessarily have the knowledge that an OPM brings to the table. So Steve Horton, for instance, was VP of DEW construction. So he had, you know, 30 years of projects under his belt that he could draw that experience from, to advise owners on how to do parts of their project. Like Charlie was saying about Andrew Day. Andrew was worked for Bensonwood Unity Homes for a long time, and was able to make those specific recommendations about the Bellows Falls Diner. You know, this is a less expensive way to do this, and accomplish kind of the same, you know, with the same goal. And so a couple of examples of people that do that. So there's a couple of different ways that you can get to the building part of things. You know, once you've selected an architect, you have design, you can hire a construction manager who, you know, GPI construction, we are construction management. We prefer doing construction management work over competitive bid, which I'll explain on the next slide. But the construction manager comes in very early on in the construction process. You know, as soon as you hire an architect and you sort of have a napkin sketch of what you want to do, the construction manager can come in and start doing rounds of budgeting. So we can say, okay, here's a general, okay, this is going to cost between $2.5 and $3 million. You know, do you have the money, the resources to do this? Or maybe you go after grant funding at that point, or find funding sources to say, okay, we have a project that's going to cost $2.5 million, round numbers. And then you start refining the project. You start putting all the details in, a sidewalk here, particular type of heater here. And you know, the construction manager will budget all that out, you know, throughout the process. And so they really help. And then we also bring our experience to the table. I've got 20 years of construction experience, and you know, lots of projects under my belt. So I'm drawing from all that, you know, all the different experience of all the projects that we've done, as well as, you know, in the GPI office, we have, you know, both Joe Fortier, president, who's been here since 2001, and you know, other superintendents, and you know, our team, you know, has a very deep well of knowledge that we can draw from for assisting owners in design and budgeting. And then clerk of the works. So back to the groundworks project. There's a gentleman, Scott McCusick, who is also a kind of a one-man show construction manager. He'll kind of work for an owner and, you know, GC subcontractors, or he'll come in and sort of run the books. The clerk of the works is basically accountable for the project being, you know, quality control on the project and holding the builder accountable to the construction documents. So Defining terms, construction documents are a set of construction drawings and a book of specifications that specifies every material and product you're going to use on that job so that you know what you're getting. And so they're inspecting to make sure you're using the right heater, the right toilet paper holder. I mean, you name it, they're making sure that everything's being done per the documents. And then in Scott's case, he's checking the documentation that I'm submitting to satisfy all the funding requirements. So a lot of the work that we do is grant funded work, and there's a lot of we're sending in all the invoices and time, Davis-Bacon wages when there's wage requirements. Section 3, we've got to there's a lot of grant funding requires you to employ low-income workers or a certain percentage of low-income local workers. So there's a lot of documentation behind satisfying the requirements of the grant funders. Next slide. So I got 2 slides here that talk about the difference between construction management and competitive bid. And with a construction management, a lot of organizations so we started working for the Wyndham-Windsor Housing Trust. The first big project we did for them was the Great River Terrace project, which is up next to Panda North in north end of Brattleboro. And it was an old motel. We were supposed to renovate 2 of the buildings and then build a new community center. So it was a 22-unit micro apartment project for essentially, low-income / homeless people. It was really, bringing people in off the streets and giving housing first, putting a roof over their heads. And that was a competitive bid process. And it was GPI won the competitive bid. That shows up in the next slide. But during that process, we talked them into, we had to tear down one of the buildings because it was really rotten. And we felt that the construction management form of delivery was the best way to go. And so they were able to convince their funding sources and their organization to go with a construction management format as opposed to competitive bid, because as part of the CM process, we are bidding all of the subcontractors out. And so we're delivering the lowest reasonable price. So don't feel, I guess what the thing I feel the construction management is a really good way to go, and we'll go through the slide, but don't feel restricted by your organization's bylaws or policies and, you have to go out for 3 competitive bids. The construction management process satisfies those for every organization that we have worked with so far, including our hospital, Groundworks, Wyndham-Windsor Housing Trust. So just because it says 3 competitive bids in your policy, dig deeper. So you're going to select either a construction manager. You can either say, hey, I know GPI Construction, I just want to hire them. But if your policy says you got to get 3 competitive bids, you're most likely going to put in a request for proposals out to construction managers. And typically your architect and your project manager are going to help you develop the RFP to send out. The CM works for the owner and is an integral member of the project team. So like I said earlier, essentially your CM is selected very early on once you have concept drawings, and we help make decisions both through our knowledge of projects as well as budgeting all that, every sort of design option that is selected, we can help budget and see if that fits within the budget. There's a pre-construction fee that we will use for estimating. So you start out and you say, okay, I want 5 estimates done during the course of this project. We're going to say, okay, that's going to cost you $6,500, or we'll put a fee to that. And then once we have the final design decided upon, the CM will put out the project for competitive bid to all the subcontractors. The CM will have a superintendent. So basically what happens is we park a job trailer on the site. We staff a superintendent to oversee all the subcontractors. And then, we have a number of, we have laborers, carpenters, helpers, carpenters, and we will essentially bid on specific scopes of the work to prove that the owner is getting, the best price, for the project. And the owner gets to make the decision on, who does the work. Maybe GPI comes in, $100 more than a subcontractor, but we're on site and you want to work with us. So the other advantage is, we'll present all the prices from all the subcontractors. And if there's someone that you don't like, or, someone you really want to work with, then you can say, owner can make the decision on, okay, I'm going to spend an extra $500 to work with A.L. Tyler Construction as opposed to someone else, because we know the owner and he contributes to our company, or, whatever.
Hey, Anthony, can you kind of clarify? So, in this construction management process, what is the, oops, sorry, I'm going backwards. We talked about a project manager being internal and owner's project manager being an external person, and then a construction manager, and then a clerk of the works. Do you need all four? Like, do you need four separate people?
Not at all.
Or how are these roles interacting in the process that you're describing?
So essentially, your owner's project manager and the clerk of the works are somewhat interchangeable. The clerk of the works typically starts their work when the construction starts, and they're just overseeing the construction documents. They are not involved typically before construction and making design and budget decisions. So it's whereas the owner's project manager can start at any time, but the preference would be to have them start at the concept of the project. And so if you have a good project manager within your organization and you don't feel like you need a third party owner's project manager that will help with design and budgeting, then you can just have sort of your internal project manager and a clerk of the works just as a third party to check all the paperwork and make sure everything's being done appropriately to satisfy the organization's policies, and if there's funding sources, satisfying those requirements. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. Meg, did you have a follow-up on that, or does that?
No, that was just, I had a question about that I popped into the chat was, do you need all three of these positions, or, can you kind of combine some of them? And it does seem that there's slightly different skill sets, but that you could overlap, or that your project manager could possibly also serve as the clerk of the works once the project is underway. Is that correct?
Exactly right. Yeah. So
Okay,
the clerk of the works is just kind of a low budget way to do things. If you just need to, if you want someone to come in and make sure everything's being done appropriately. Whereas the OPM kind of helps out, from the concept. And the other thing too is we've run plenty of projects where it's just the owner and their own team, the architect, and us as the construction manager. It depends on sort of how comfortable the team is with each other, and the experience of the owners, as whether they need an owner's project manager or not. But typically it makes sense to have the OPM because of hopefully their breadth of knowledge of the process and different options.
And it looks like Charlie has a comment on that too. Let me get you unmuted, Charlie. And while you're unmuting, I'll just mention Lisa had asked, Lisa, we'll talk about getting paid too in a little bit, but Lisa had asked if any of these roles do grant writing and fundraising or project development. And I think not usually grant writing and fundraising, but sometimes the owner's project management will be involved in the project development, from what I understand. But Charlie, you can speak to that a little bit too.
Right. Well, the thing, Lisa had also asked earlier about how the owner's project manager is paid and whether it's a good use of the funds. And what Anthony is I just would say in our experience, it's been a fantastic investment, because our owner's project manager understands the sequence in which events are going to need to happen, so that our volunteer board is not tripping over itself doing stuff in the wrong order that then has to get redone. It's a wonderful, you're hiring a professional who knows exactly how this stuff is done. I think it's a great investment. In terms of payment, yeah, we paid him directly out of our fundraising, and then Preservation Trust has said this is exactly the kind of thing that we are happy to help, to reimburse you for, because it's going to, in the long run, cost you less to have had a professional on board this quickly. So I think it's I would feel at sea without having the OPM at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Charlie.
I also,
then-
can I jump in for a second too and say oftentimes that's the kind of pre-project development thing that you can get funded. So say, we're going to do this project. It's to do it right, we're gonna need to hire a project manager. And so then you can go seek that funding. So from various sources that are available for, technical assistance funding sources can often can fund that, because that's what you need to pull it together. And then it's putting together the pieces that you need so that you can go apply for bigger funding. Oftentimes what stops you being able to get the big funding is that you don't have the plan. And so it's really a great investment at the beginning to have a project manager help you work through those steps, again, doing things in the right order. And then now you're much more fundable, I would say. So I would just put in a plug for that.
And then Marty is asking, and I have this question too. So if you have an owner's project manager, then do you need a construction manager? Like, are those, do you need both of those roles as well? And you were kind of giving us an overview, Anthony, of the construction management in contrast to the traditional RFP, where the construction management fee structure is different, and the construction management firm will put things out to bid sort of piece by piece. But if you have an owner's project manager, do you have to have construction management, or how do those potentially interact?
Yeah, so if someone, another couple slides down, so there are some, it kind of comes down to the design of part of it's the design of the project. And when there's some like Breadloaf Construction, for instance, or Pizzagelli, they have a design department in-house. GPI, other than our regular customers, I mean, there's projects at the hospital and the library, small stuff where we'll go in and do a napkin sketch and build it. With the bigger kind of projects that we're talking about here, we really need architectural drawings and, most likely other engineered drawings as well to complete the project. And so when a customer calls us up and says, okay, we want to build this, the first question we ask is, have you engaged a design professional? Most of the time the answer is no, and we'll make a recommendation. We'll give them a list of architects or engineers, whatever their project requires, and say, when you have a design or, you have a concept, come back to us, or, we can sort of we'll meet with the owner and the architect and, walk them through the process. And the architect will go back and, spend a few weeks and do some concept drawings and come back, and we'll all meet again. And so I love doing that, but that is, you're not necessarily putting out an RFP for construction managers. You're calling up GPI and saying, hey, we want to work with you guys because we've seen your website, we know your work, you guys are great to work with. And so we do that a lot. We've got projects all over town, that we've done that with. And however, if you want to meet a bunch of, several different construction managers, look at your options. When I was director of facilities at the retreat, I was unhappy with the builder that I was working with at the time. And so I put out an RFP, and we interviewed HP Cummings Construction, Engelberth Construction, DEW Construction, and we ended up selecting HP just because we sort of liked their reputation, and they had a lot of hospital experience, and really liked the staff. So if you have someone on your construction committee, your owner's team, and you're comfortable putting together a list of questions, and you want to bring a construction manager on board, before you get the design professional involved, you can do that. But that owner's project manager would help you in a similar way that we could. It's kind of it's a third party check on things. We are, so in a construction management format, we are there's a contract, there's a standard, the American Institute of Architects and AIA contract that we work under. So all sort of the roles and responsibilities and deliverables are defined. But there is, a huge advantage to having an owner's project manager on board that's really, can help with the design and gut checking everything, even though, I'm happy to play that role as well.
And something that really was helpful to me in talking about this, Anthony, was just pointing out that in the competitive bid process, there is the danger of bids sort of not really including everything that they need to include. So if you go with the lowest bid, you might be setting yourself up for cost overruns, but an OPM can really help you like evaluate these bids and really understand what they're bringing to the table and how carefully they've thought through this sort of thing. I'm just, in the interest of time, going to move us on to the next slide, but feel free to ask some questions as we go on. So, we've already kind of covered that you want to bring an OPM in as soon as you possibly can. And Anthony mentioned you wouldn't hire construction management until you have at least a concept. So the OPM will help you work with the design professional and really define what you need. And then a construction management firm could help you really drill down budget and bidding it out, that sort of thing. This is just a little bit that we put together about, how much is this going to cost? Like Charlie mentioned, having a project manager, an OPM, or a construction management firm, or both, really can help you not miss things that would cost you money in the long run. And then the OPM, we put some details here on this slide for you about what that might cost you. It's sort of their time investment will depend on what point of the process you're in. Feel free to ask some more specifics about that too. And then Anthony put together just some recommendations. There's not a whole lot of OPMs in the region, but here are some folks that, are go-to folks that are reliable, that lots of people have had great experiences with around the region. Marty mentioned, she's working with Steve Horton right now. And we'll send the slides out, so you'll have these at your disposal. And then Charlie had shared with me, here's just an example of, OPM will put together a timeline for you to just kind of like, this is how things are gonna probably go. This will help you with grant planning. I'm just gonna go through these kind of quickly to make sure we can get to Q&A, and then I'll turn Charlie and Anthony loose on you. Yeah, so I think we'll get additional tips in there when we do Q&A. So I'd just love to hear from folks. What sort of questions are burning on your minds, or what would you like some additional tips on? Feel free to type it in the chat or just raise your hand, and we'll have you unmute and share your question. Okay, I'm not seeing a burning question. So, oh, here we go, Lisa. Yay!
Hi, here you can see me. So I've talked to many of you about this, and I keep going around and round. And I've talked to Charlie, and Charlie generously shared his RFP for a manager. And that was surprising to me, Charlie, I would say, because it was very comprehensive and touched on fundraising, what I consider project development aspects that seem to be things that you were expecting from the project manager, as well as construction expertise and bringing that to the table too. And I should say I've done this as a volunteer in 2 projects. One was a competitive bid style project, and the other was construction management with GPI, I would say, which in Putney. But I basically kind of filled most of those roles, as well as project development, and it just all blended together. So I don't know. And it took a ton of time that I'm not willing to give to my new project for free. So I'm just trying to tease out what should we as the owners of the project be expected to bring to the table in time, and what can we expect potentially from a project manager starting early?
Anthony, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I mean, I know, Charlie and we talked about this at the last meeting we had, where, at the onset of the project, there's a heavy time investment in sort of teasing out all of the things that you want to get out of the project. And I think for me, it would be, you know, I would, as a volunteer group, I would look to hire an owner's project manager early on, because they're going to help you consolidate, you know, a lot of the work that you might otherwise spend a lot of time trying to figure out. And then selecting an architect and going to the architect with a lot of specific things that you want to accomplish. So you're not necessarily just going to the architect with a lot of sort of big ideas. You know, they've been refined before you go to the architect, so that you're both saving money, because the architect's expensive, and you know they're going to give you a proposal, you know, a fee for designing the project, and then a percentage that they're going to mark it up if they do construction administration, if they, you know, stay on through the project. So you know, from a time standpoint, I think you want to budget, you know, several hours, you know, a week, you know, for a few weeks to help design the project. And on the owner's side, when I've been involved in designing projects at the Brattleboro Retreat, the architects would come in and interview people. You know, we probably had 15 hours a week that the architect was interviewing staff members to help kind of design the project. And I think that the administration could have done some, if they had a, you know, I was manager of facilities, so I was doing other things as well as sort of PMing this. But if your owner's project manager should be able to help, you know, really sort of identify a lot of the key points that you want to accomplish with the project and help cut down on that. But, you know, you're going to be, you know, it's going to kind of ebb and flow. You're going to have a concentration of time, then you'll meet with the architect, give them everything you want to do. You're going to have 5 hours a week for 3 weeks. You're going to get another 15 hours in 1 week. So it's going to ebb and flow over a period of months as you're designing the project.
And I think too, you know, we talked about this, our recommended list. These folks will probably have different strengths and expertise, so it may be worth just chatting with a couple of them and seeing how big of a scope they're willing to take on. Marty, what's on your mind?
So I just had a general comment for anyone that's on the fence about getting a project manager or owner's rep. I've been working on this project for 3 years now, maybe 4 years. And boy, do I wish I knew there was such a thing as an owner's project manager rep when I started. It probably would have saved me time. And the thing that I found invaluable is I'm trying to replace a boiler system. And it's very costly to replace it with the biomass boiler, and it's been a hard time finding grant funding. So one of the meetings I had with Steve, he said, the bottom line is you need a boiler. So we're going to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, based upon the funding that you get. So that was invaluable. Like, I don't know if I would have thought of it that way. It would have been like, we can either do this project or we can't. Not that we have to do this project. It might not look like, he said it might not be the shiny Mercedes that you want. It might be a Corolla, so, because that's what you have the money for. So that type of guidance for me, working as a team of one, was invaluable. So if anyone's on the fence, I can't emphasize enough that it's, if you can get them in on the very beginning of it, I gotta think it's going to save you some money in the long run.
Right. I would, if I could jump in also here, Lissa had asked if OPMs do any of the grant writing and fundraising. In my experience, so working with Andrew, that's not really his wheelhouse, but no, I'm sure any OPM would be able to point people to persons who can help with those aspects. We actually, early on, Preservation Trust put us in touch with and funded a small, a 2-time meeting with a fundraising developer. And then we've gone on, that was helpful in our creating our fundraising plan. And we've raised 175,000 plus getting the Bruin grant. So we've done quite well with fundraising, but it really isn't our OPM's his job. In terms of, he will step in occasionally if we're all too busy and write a letter to a potential, where you have to send in a letter of interest. He will do that, but he's not really directing. He's not at all directing the fundraising or the grant, doing any grant writing.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you, Charlie. All right, so I'm just looking at our time and I want to make sure that you all get out of here when you expect to get out of here. So thank you so much, Anthony and Charlie, for sharing this introduction. This is, such a complex topic. We could talk about it for a long time, and especially because every project is kind of individual. So, Anthony and Charlie are available if you guys wanted to reach out to them with follow-up questions. Meg and I are available too if you had some more general thoughts. Meg is particularly experienced and knowledgeable about people that she can put you in touch with for community projects. So we're here. This isn't the end of the conversation, but we are coming to the end of the webinar. So thank you so much, Anthony and Charlie. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And we wish you all the best with all of your projects. Thank you so much for all you do to make this a better place to live.
Thank you.
Thank you.